He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matthew? Oh yes, welcome back for Season 2, Episode 45 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, we started off with the greatest tush-push in NFL history from Josh Allen, the reigning MVP, in the wild card round, and laid out some opportunities for improvement and innovation of the play if everyone is okay now with it not being banned. Then the MLB third base market was hot. Nolan Arenado finalized his divorce with the Cardinals, waiving his no-trade clause to head to the Diamondbacks, and Alex Bregman got locked down for a long time with the Cubs. Let me tell you, you're all lucky that the Dodgers signed Kyle Tucker after I had recorded last week, because I could have gone on and spiraled and spouted forever on a 4-year, $240 million contract. We talked too much about Dodger ball here, so let's leave that. What else? We ended off with predicting the NFL divisional games and whiffing almost everywhere. I was putting up Shaq at the free throw line kind of numbers with anything I predicted there. And this week, let's crack it open with the one betting scandal to end them all, and one of the harshest punishments yet seen for anybody involved. Timothy McCormack is a memorable name all on its own, I would say. And as Tanner White, someone who would say that they have a memorable name, hopefully I feel I'm a qualified authority on the subject, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't want to be known as the man who's going to federal prison for 2 years for his role in the NBA betting scandal. This has sidelined the Heat's Terry Rozier and the Raptors' Jonte Porter for life. McCormack's sentence ended up coming in below what the prosecutors were looking for, which was 4 years, but above what his defense wanted, which of course was no time served. So what did McCormack do that's so frowned upon? Would you believe that the federal government does not take kindly to using insider information the public doesn't have to inform your bets? And would you believe that players willingly taking themselves out of games, trying to affect the game's point totals, or sandbagging their own performance to make sure prop bets hit are also not taken too kindly? The integrity of sports as a whole became the wider talk in the courtroom. Go ahead and read the ESPN article that I'll link for you here. I don't know how much more there is to be said about the integrity of sports that hasn't been said already. What we're still not seeing is reduced advertising for the people that find themselves inclined to get into the betting mix. It's hard to get through a quarter of any televised game out there in any sport without seeing a 30-second sportsbook commercial. And they're flashy, and they look cool and fun, and they're on mobile devices. And I don't have numbers to back this up, but it feels like it's worse during primetime and important games. Of course, if I were these companies, I would spend my ad dollars on the spots that have the most eyes on them, but it's just no wonder that more people around the world have a problem with gambling than ever before. I am in the camp that still thinks it's strange that athletes themselves are willing participants. And don't say that they're not, because Jonte Porter pleaded guilty to his conspiracy charge in 2024. The Cleveland Guardians' Emmanuel Clase is another strange case, and he's still on paid leave, but he could be permanently banned whenever his investigation wraps up. During Guardians games, there would be abnormal betting on Clase to throw the next pitch for a ball, and then he would spike the ball wildly, among other examples. What kind of margin do any of these guys stand to make? What kind of cut are they getting? You know what I'm saying? That they'll risk their contracts and careers, let alone time in federal prison. The Band-Aid solution that I expect, and probably most people would vote for, is just to ban player prop bets altogether. That way, an individual cannot sandbag and make sure that the bets on the unders hit. But they'll still be able to affect the score lines of games, and that takes a whole lot more collusion and a wider network of people involved. Let me take it to you, the people, and I would love to hear a good suggestion in the comments as to what might be the long-term comprehensive solution to the entire issue of sports betting, how we go about managing and balancing what's fun versus what's over the line. Moving on to baseball in the Big Apple, where the arms race and even the bats race are heating up. The New York Mets are looking to load back up after their epic September collapse and missing the postseason this year, even after paying Juan Soto roughly the GDP of American Samoa in the largest sports contract of all time. They're doing it big this week by spending, but also by swapping. The free agent signing of the Blue Jays' diminutive star shortstop Bo Bichette is a piece of the puzzle, but it's a jagged one where the fit is uncertain, and you kind of got to wonder whether it was just cut wrong at the factory. You ever done a puzzle like that, and it's like 1,000 pieces, and just a few of them are like, nah, this can't be a real piece, or it must have been cut wrong? The thing is, the Mets have a superstar shortstop, a very likely Hall of Famer, Francisco Lindor. You know him. He's been top 10 in MVP voting in 7 different seasons and accumulated 55.7 wins above replacement in 11 years. The 50 WAR threshold is often enough to bring you towards the Hall of Fame, at least to get you fair consideration. Now they're bringing in another one of these shortstops and going to have to figure out what to do with him in the field, the lineup, and kind of in the clubhouse. The bidding war with Bo Bichette involved all of the usual suspects, the Yankees, the Red Sox, Dodgers, Cubs, and the Phillies were said to really want him. The eventual price tag soared all the way to 3 years at $126 million, or $42 million a year. So why did the Mets, with an already probable Hall of Famer at shortstop, get into the sweepstakes for him? Let's talk. Bichette is 27 years old. Lindor is 32. So this is not a massive youth movement, although every team likes to get younger every year. To say that their baseball talent is equal would be too generous to Bichette, as Lindor is truly one of the most consistent players of the last decade, probably second only to the Guardians' Jose Ramirez. Do they love the tools that he has? Well, he has some advanced numbers on his Baseball Savant page that would put you off from him, like a 21st percentile sprint speed, 1st percentile fielding range, 4th percentile fielding run value, 10th percentile base running run value. The more that I list these, the more I'm shocked. I don't know that the eye test is that brutal on him, but the advanced numbers are. I mentioned he's diminutive. Relatively to the prototypical shortstop nowadays, he stands 5'11", 190. Now, never in the history of baseball has a shortstop looked like O'Neal Cruz, or Ellie De La Cruz for that matter, up until now, but this feels like a shift back to a different archetype of player altogether. Bichette is going to have to play some third base, or at least try. Technically, at some point, you could move him to second as well, but Lindor is nailed down there at shortstop. And Bichette might have to be a 3 or a 4-hole hitter in the lineup after Pete Alonso left for the Orioles in free agency. Would you want your lineup constructed with a free-swinging guy who never walks, has a career high of 29 home runs, and he might need to be relegated to a DH role at that size, much, much younger than people on average? Any middle-of-the-order bat is expensive. We know that. And it will continue to get more expensive every year. But when compared with the contract of, say, Alex Bregman, is anyone confident that Bo Bichette is going to be a more productive player per dollar spent? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. He just happened to be the most attractive quote-unquote shortstop on the market this year, and that means he gets this record-breaking contract. You'll never guess who had the record for the highest average annual and total value in their contract of all shortstops. Lindor. An average of over $76 million a year to 2 players who play the same position. That's got to be some kind of record for non-starting pitchers. But that's the New York Mets. I can commend their ownership on exactly one thing. Not locking him down for 6 or 8 or 10 years. Because then you guarantee that he's going to become an unproductive money sink in the last couple of years. And as is always the case with the new deals that reset the market, both sides got some protection. There are player options after the first and second years of the contract, meaning that Bichette can opt out of the deal after either of those years and become a free agent again. He wouldn't do that unless he has such an MVP-like season that there would be a team willing to swoop in with an even more expensive luxury rental. I won't rule out that possibility. He's a good hitter, and he's the son of a fairly accomplished hitter, Dante Bichette, who hit .299 for his career with a very similar style of minimal walks and tons of contact. But what did I say just last week about the WAR to dollar value? His average WAR per season is 3, and the price tag is $42 million a year. Following that $8 million per WAR rule that you expect to get on the open market, it's an overpay of, if my math checks out, $18 million a year. If he continues to produce at this same rate for 3 years, well, then them's the facts. Don't like this one so much. The Mets have also made I hesitate to call it a blockbuster trade, but they did acquire the Brewers' #1 starter, Freddie Peralta. I'm also hesitant to call Peralta an ace, but he was throwing like one down the stretch. His last 10 starts of the year were hyper elite, honestly. Just look down at the game log. 51 innings, 70 strikeouts, 5-1 record, and a 1.76 ERA. He was a huge part of the reason that Milwaukee won the NL Central by 5 games over a similarly talented Cubs team and had that obscene 14-game win streak in August. To counter this and try and tip the balance of power back in their favor, the other New York team, the Yankees, stayed in-house and prioritized re-signing slugger Cody Bellinger. He was rewarded for a big year last year with 5 years, $162.5 million, just $12.5 million behind what Alex Bregman got. Bellinger is heading into year 10 in the league. He's won an MVP before, and honestly, last year was still probably his second best year of his career. He's had just a really strange career arc in general. Win MVP at 23 years old with the Dodgers. Hey, world's your oyster. And then you nosedive for the next 3 years. You get traded to the Cubs for peanuts in 2023. Then you continue to be a productive hitter, and you still wind up on your third team, the Yankees, before finally getting that very high-end free agent contract just now. The Yankees' offense from this year fared just fine without Juan Soto in the lineup, and Bellinger was a big part of that. He hit 29 home runs, he drove in 98, and for a guy that's played significant time at all 3 outfield spots and even mixed in at first base, he was a fantastic defender. Like way better than you'd expect of a power hitter that you don't really know where to play defensively. I love Baseball Savant because it makes you rethink everything you think you know about players you've been watching for years. Anyway, I'll link his Baseball Savant page too, just like Bo Bichette's, and you'll see that he's productive in every area of the game. He's at 72nd percentile speed. He's a plus base runner. He stole 13 bags this year, only being caught once. He's one of the rangiest outfielders in the game and has one of the best arms by whatever measure you're looking at. Now, my only question is on him. Why is Bellinger worth half of Kyle Tucker per year? New York is said to want to keep Bellinger mostly in left field for this coming year. Yason Dominguez was one of those top prospects that just never really worked out, and they don't have time to keep quote-unquote developing him. Bellinger is a developed big league star in his prime. I really don't care that he's been around now for 10 years. I think there's a chance, if you project him to hold on to his speed and defensive abilities for quite a while, that he becomes the best value free agent of anybody that's signed this year. Bellinger isn't heavy set, he isn't a first baseman, catcher, or DH archetype, and he isn't a very high strikeout or 3 true outcomes guy. He could definitely stand to walk more with a .334 career OBP, but you can overlook that with all of his other abilities factored in. I really do like this Cody Bellinger deal a lot, and again, I'm going to push for this as probably the best free agent signing so far of the whole MLB offseason. And before we're out of here, let's predict the NFL Conference Championship rounds. I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams that the playoff field could be this way, but then the young gun quarterbacks and some blanket defenses made it possible. All 4 of the teams playing this weekend finished the regular season with 12 wins or more. And the only team in the league with exactly 13 wins, Jacksonville, fun fact for you, they were bounced in the wild card by a field goal against the Bills. This is one of the most difficult rounds, and especially thinking toward the Super Bowl, to predict that I can ever remember. Today I'm going to try to do just that and be probably as hilariously wrong this week as I was last. I thought the Rams would run over the Bears, and that ended up being the closest game by far. I thought the 49ers and Seahawks would play the closest game, and then the Niners lost by 5 touchdowns. And although the Bills and Broncos went to overtime, I believed in Josh Allen, and he did not make that magical moment happen like he so often does. He threw a pick in OT, and the Broncos would win. So I believe the only game I picked the right results in was Patriots-Texans. Good news is the worst I can be this week is 0 for 2. AFC Championship game, Broncos and Patriots. Obviously a matchup that we haven't seen since Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in 2015. What an insanely loaded 2024 draft class this was, guys. Jeez. We didn't get to feel it quite enough this year because Jaden Daniels, J.J. McCarthy, and Michael Penix were all injured for significant stretches. But these quarterbacks are positively special. And speaking of injuries, Bo Nix will not be able to join us for this game, seeing as he just broke his ankle in overtime of the Bills game. I fully believe that the better quarterback and the better football player is Drake May, even though I also think he's going to place second to Matthew Stafford in MVP voting. There's zero shame in that. But it is heartbreaking that the Broncos are unironically going to have to play Jarrett Stidham at quarterback in a game that matters, let alone the biggest game they've played in 11 years. Stidham has 4 career starts since being drafted in 2019. He's never been and is never going to be the guy. I had a defensive coordinator when I played college football who would sometimes tell us at practice, hey, no one's coming down that hill to help you guys. You have who you have on your roster, basically, is what he meant. Their backup will now be Sam Ehlinger on Sunday, who's thrown about half of the passes that Stidham has and has only ever made 4 career starts himself. New England originally drafted Stidham as one of the numerous attempts at succeeding Tom Brady, so they're familiar with his game or lack thereof. Let me keep this simple. The Broncos' defense is great, nearly historically so, and that defense is going to keep them in it for much of the game, but they will not be able to score more than 13 points. Drake May won't have to do a whole lot offensively. I believe in the Patriots running the ball with their 2-back system between Trevion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson. And when the Denver defense is constantly having to defend short fields and be on the field for a lot of plays, the cracks are going to show. I think it's going to be lopsided at Patriots 31, Broncos 13, with the one Denver touchdown coming on something funky. Maybe a defensive or a special teams touchdown, if not just something tricky and different on offense. It is Sean Payton. I always say he's one of the great offensive minds there's ever been, and his bag of tricks is deep, but with no Bo Nix, there is no hope for Denver. The Seahawks and Rams meet in the NFC Championship. We've been saying to ourselves for almost 2 full seasons, wait, Sam Darnold can't be this good. Not Jets Sam Darnold, right? Not that guy. That guy who threw 45 touchdowns to 39 interceptions in 3 years. I will grant that his turnovers are back this year. He threw 14 interceptions and led the league with 11 fumbles. That's not ideal. But I'll also note that he had 4 game-winning drives in the regular season, and if he wins this game, he can be counted on, essentially in perpetuity, in big games. The Rams were a paradoxical struggle fest down the stretch against bad teams, which I've mentioned before. They did all right against good teams. And I don't think that this year's Bears, who they beat in overtime in the divisional, were a bad team, but they are not on Seattle's level. In terms of who's playing the best right now, no one else is. And that really starts with team defense. Let's do the math here. 6 points allowed last week to the Niners in the divisional. 3 points allowed to the Niners in Week 18. That was a win that secured them the number 1 seed and the bye week. 10 points allowed in Week 17 to the Panthers, who aren't great but did win their division. That's 19 points allowed in their last 3 games. 19 points in 12 quarters. There is one glaring exception to this rule of dominance. The last time these two teams played, the Rams scored 37 on them. Seattle would only win that one by converting a 2-point try in overtime. And I mentioned it at the time, it was the first 2-point conversion to win an overtime game in NFL history, although it hasn't been possible for long. Matthew Stafford is the only guy with a Super Bowl ring that's currently in the playoff field, and I would personally like to see him cement his Hall of Fame status and start getting put a little bit higher on people's all-time list of quarterbacks by winning another one. He will have his absolute fullest complement of offensive weapons. Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, you know what they do, and Devontae looks healthy with a hamstring after he came back in time for the wild card. The one sort of question mark on the injury report is their starting tackle, Rob Havenstein, but even he seems likely to come back. And fun fact, the Rams and Patriots were the two least injured teams in football this year. I'll show you this chart again from Sports Info Solutions, just because it's cool. I don't know what the formula to break through Seattle's defense is, but I believe that one man on earth does know, and I think that's Sean McVay. McVay has gotten to coach against Seattle twice a year, every year, for 8 years in a row, and he's been to 2 Super Bowls too, lest we forget Jared Goff in 2018. The far more experienced coach combined with the far more experienced quarterback is actually going to lead me to pick the inferior team on paper. All of my predictions go like this. I think the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker, their top running back, will be held under 50 yards on 20 carries or more. Sam Darnold turns the ball over 3 times in the face of the Rams' wicked pass rush. And the Rams will see a rushing touchdown from a non-running back. Maybe a tight end running a tush-push like I mentioned last week, or a jet sweep to Puka Nacua. Maybe it's even Matt Stafford getting a little frisky and scrambling. The Rams will fight for their lives, but I do think they'll win this one and send Matthew Stafford back to the Super Bowl again 5 years later with a 27-24 upset over the number 1 seed Seahawks. Booyah. And the thing I'll leave you with this week is one of those stats that you're never going to be able to do anything with, but it is hilarious. 2 of the youngest head coaches in the league, Sean McVay and Mike Macdonald, will meet in probably the more juicy matchup, just considering the Bo Nix injury. And Sean Payton and Mike Vrabel, the relatively old heads, will leave the Broncos and Patriots in the AFC. Let me say that one more time. Sean versus Mike, and Sean versus Mike. This is going to be the first time in recorded history that the first names of the head coaches in each conference championship match. Do with that whatever you will. Thanks for coming back week after week, or if you're relatively new here, as always, we are happy to have you. Either way, check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, at The Voice of Tanner, X, just Voice of Tanner, YouTube, the whole thing spelled out with spaces. Leave a like, comment, and share. Catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 45 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me. He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you?